Hey everyone, welcome back to Crunching Your Growth, the show where we dive deep with entrepreneurs who built, scaled, and evolved their businesses by thinking differently. I'm your host, Phil Masiello, entrepreneur, brand builder, and founder of Crunch Growth, a revenue acceleration agency, and we've been helping brands scale profitably over 20 years. So we don't just teach theory, we write books on it. And when you listen to this show, you're not just getting advice from me and other entrepreneurs, you're getting real world experience, lessons learned in the trenches, wins, losses that shape the playbook we use to help brands thrive. So if you're serious about scaling, about doing the work it takes to build something that lasts, you're in the right place. And today, we're diving deep into one of the most transformative spaces in tech, InsurTech. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This is not something that I understand or know. So I'm looking forward to this episode because we have an expert in it, David Gritz. He's the visionary co-founder of InsurTech Fund and InsurTech New York. From launching startups to building the largest InsurTech community in America, he's been at the forefront of innovation in insurance. So if you want to understand how the insurance world is being disrupted and where the biggest opportunities lie, this is the conversation you don't want to miss. So I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, the guy is brilliant. He's just phenomenal when it comes to this particular channel. And let's face it, everybody out there, entrepreneurs, people listening, people watching, everybody's got their niche. We have had ed tech, fintech. We've had all these different pieces, but we all have insurance needs. So he's going to talk about how that's being disrupted. So let's bring him in and let's see what he has to say. David, I appreciate you taking the time to come on and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got to this point, a little bit about your past and what's happening in the world of insurance.
Phil, thanks for having me on the show today. And, I think you really summed it up. Everyone's touched by insurance. It's one of those things where if you drive a car, if you own a house with a mortgage, if you have kids, you've probably had to buy something, but you don't think about all of the parts that undergird the entire economy. So the shipment that came from, Vietnam to eventually get to your door that had to be covered with marine cargo insurance, the airplanes that you fly in to get to your vacation home, or even the credit products that make sure that the ETFs that are offered to you are protected by directors and officers insurance. So it's kind of the behind the scenes puzzle or plumbing behind almost every part of the business. So to share my background, people in the insurance industry get into there one of two ways. Either their family was in insurance, so they just figure they might as well do it too. Or like me or most of the others in the industry, you kind of just fell into it. So I started my career as an engineer. I went to a school in Pennsylvania called Lehigh, and then I graduated and joined a company in Allentown, Pennsylvania called Computer Aid. And, they did one of the most boring things you could do, which is large fortune companies like, airlines, chemical companies, insurance companies, they all have software that was built in like the 1960s and 1970s.
Right.
And most of the people that run it have already retired for the companies. So they're a company of mainly older people that comes in and says, wait, we have people that had built software in the 1960s and 70s. We'll take over it. So now you can go and work on the next thing. So I got to learn about a lot of different industries and how those industries maintain their aging tech and make kind of a transformation, which was pretty foundational for me because, some of the things that I did after that were built off of technology. And I knew, if you built something in the 60s and it's still running today, 65 years later, you probably had some pretty good thinking that went into it. And I got to meet some of the people that knew how those systems worked. So from there, I went on to my own entrepreneurial path. So I started a construction business in Philadelphia. We renovated and fixed and flipped homes. So in some of the rougher neighborhoods, and really made some nice projects that look like something you could find on HGTV. And then I started a business in the education technology space. We helped universities that had entrepreneurs that once they graduated, a lot of people think like, once you graduate a university, you have everything you need and you can go off with your wings and fly. But if you're building a biotech and you need access to wet labs, or you are doing, advanced, physics, you don't have access to the labs anymore. So
Right.
our company connected back the entrepreneurs to the university to keep having the resources as they graduated and to be successful. We worked with universities in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And then, I fell into the insurance industry about a decade ago. A friend of mine reached out to me. He was running an insurance company at the time based in Pennsylvania that worked with large industrial companies, insuring their workers for workers' compensation and their drivers for commercial auto insurance. And, it was really a turnaround opportunity. They had an issue where essentially their primary backer that was providing them with additional balance sheet support, which is maybe a new term for this audience, but they're called a reinsure. So think about an insurance company for an insurance company. So insurance companies are good at like everyday risk, but the rare things like, the flood that happened in Texas, or, a hurricane, or the pandemic, they're not really made for that. So they have to go to the global markets and get access to capital for the risks that they can't really cover. So in this case, they were running their business, and then their reinsurer, which was important to their financials, said, actually, we're no longer interested in working with you, because they had, some rough financial years. And, they were ultimately able to find a new one, but in the time they lost 80% of their revenue and needed to turn around. So my friend Todd reached out to me. He's like, hey, you want to help me fix this company? I was like, I don't know anything about insurance, but sure a lot about, technology and startups. So why don't we team up? So we spun off a tech company called Zero, for zero lost days of work. And it was a very simple idea. We would educate people within industrial companies. So think, companies that drive people around, so bus companies and logistics companies, companies that move and make things, so manufacturing and distribution companies. And we had a couple like, farm oriented companies. And basically all of those companies, they wake up every day and their people do dangerous jobs.
Yeah.
What they all have in common, even though, one might be an almond farmer in Modesto, another might be, a porta potty transportation company in Pennsylvania. Uh, what they have in common is that their workers, the people on the line, they think about what they do, and each decision they make affects the subsequent safety of their job. The more they're aware of what can go wrong and the best practices, the safer they'll be. So, our app was all about helping educate those workers, and they could hear the voices from their peers, not from the nagging mom safety manager that, oh, you need to wear your hard hat, or you need to, drink extra water when it's hot out today. But they were actually hearing from other people doing similar jobs than them in different factories about what can go wrong. And that concept is called behavioral based safety. So, we were very fortunate early on. And Phil was telling me about one of his previous guests and mentors that said, if you find someone that knows a lot about your space, like no matter who they are, you should just reach out to them. And our moment for that at Zero was we reached out to a guy named Paul O'Neill, not the baseball player, but the former Treasury Secretary. And before he was the Treasury Secretary, he was the CEO of Alcoa. And Alcoa in the 1980s was already safer than US Steel, safer than Nucor, safer than most of the industrial metal companies. But when he became CEO, he came into the stockholders meeting in 1987 and he said the most important value of this company is safety above shareholder returns. Half the people walked out of the room, and then he went to do his work. He increased the market cap of the company more than 10 times over his time working there. And more importantly, for safety perspective, he reduced the days of lost work, so time where people are injured enough that they can't come into work the next day, by 90%. And in fact, he told us that Alcoa was a safer company than the Treasury Department when he worked in both, and they had roughly the same number of employees, between 100 and 150,000 employees. So he became one of the advisors of our company, and we put all of his best practices into play into the application. So that was kind of my taste into the InsurTech world. We scaled that company. We sold it to the reinsurer for the insurance company that we spun out of, called Everest Re. And then I kind of went on to a little different path. I decided I wanted to go to law school. So I did that. And while I was there, I found out about a group in Silicon Valley called the Silicon Valley Insurance Accelerator that was helping early stage startups in the insurtech space, similar to the one that I built, help them out, and then ultimately came up with the idea for InsurTech New York to build something similar in New York that could serve the world, because New York has the greatest concentration of venture capital investors, of insurance companies, and tech companies trying to change the insurance space of anywhere else in the world. So the fact that they didn't have a group trying to support it and help companies all around the world get access to the resources there was mind boggling to me. And maybe it was the sign in the universe that it was my job to do it.
That's a great story. That's a great story. What was the big? There was a big reinsurance company in New York that got really hurt during 2008 during that financial crisis, right?
Yeah. It was
Hank.
called AIG,
Yeah,
American
yeah,
Insurance
yeah,
Group.
yeah, yeah. Um, that the only thing I know about reinsurance is that and Berkshire Hathaway, because I think Warren Buffett owned a big reinsurance company.
Right. They own several. One of them is TransRe, which is based in Oakland area. And, they are one of the global reinsurers.
So do you own do you own an insurance technology company now, or do you just focus on the accelerator part of what you're doing to help build or to help scale other insurance technology companies?
Yeah, so I think the best way I would classify what we do is we're an entrepreneurial support organization. So we run education and networking events for entrepreneurs in the space and, traditional insurance companies. We have two different accelerator programs where we help companies make progress. We have a venture capital fund as well. And we are in the process of building a reinsurance company, but that probably won't be live until later this year or early next year.
So you and your partners have a venture capital fund that you're investing in the insurance technology space.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, and so what's the criteria for that? Like, what stage are you going after with your venture fund?
Yeah, so for our venture fund, we predominantly invest in seed stage startups. So companies between 100,000 and 2 million in revenue that have finished their product and have demonstrated, some market traction. They're not mature enough to have figured everything out, but they're kind of early in their journey.
So, would you consider yourself sort of a Y Combinator for in the insurance tech space?
People have told us that before. I'll be happy to take credit to be the Y Combinator of InsurTech.
I say that because we've had a number of Y Combinator graduates on with their brands, and the whole process of which I really admire the process of accelerating and providing more value than just dollars, just money, because I think that's where startups, whether I don't care what space you're in, but startups sometimes go after the money and they don't think about the other things that go along with money, right? Y Combinator is great for people because of the information you get, the contacts you make, what you get introduced to, the people they bring in to talk. So that type of thing, that type of environment to me is more valuable than just money, right? Money is
Oh, completely agree. I mean, a lot of people forget, but starting a business is a very human process, right? If you get investors. They're one of your stakeholders. You got to keep them happy. And then you got to keep your customers happy. And then you got to keep your employees happy. And you have to balance them all in this kind of three-way balance beam. And, I find that a lot of the calls I take with our founders or portfolio companies is not necessarily solving a technical insurance problem. I mean, we're happy to help solve those, but it's solving a problem like, hey, I can't get along with my co-founder. What do I do? Or, the board told me this expectation. I don't think it's reasonable. How do I push back to them? Do you have some data to support that? Or we need to make a strategic decision between market A and market B. How do I think through that? Do you have any, strategy or framework? So a lot of these things are critical thinking questions that, ultimately you don't necessarily have to be an insurance guru to answer the question on. You just have to have pattern recognition. And, over the last decade, I've probably met more than 2,000 InsurTech founders. So every little anecdote and every little story is stored in some like crevice in the back of my head. So hopefully when I come to the conversation, I can pull one of those anecdotes and they've had time to mature. So I can say this happened 3 years ago and this happened 6 years ago. And, based off of these two things, you should probably do this to get the outcome that you want. But by the way, if you don't believe me, I'll just introduce you to one of those 2,000 people and they can tell you firsthand what happened with, more fidelity than me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I coach entrepreneurs in a different space than you. I coach eminently consumer product or SaaS products, people that are building something like that, mostly consumer facing, and it's amazing. I I always think that I have groups and I have individuals that I work with, and I always think that I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about business problems or issues with capital allocation, capital raise, things like that. And what winds up happening is they're more emotional decisions about a business than anything else. And what I mean by that is when something sort of goes wrong in the business, which things happen all the time, some entrepreneurs you need to talk them off the ledge. They feel like the world is crashing, and like you said, I can't get along with my partner. I don't know how we're going to resolve this. The board is putting pressure on me, things like that, and it's more of that, which is more. I mean, it's coaching, but it's more emotional intelligence coaching, I guess, would be a better phrase for it. So I understand exactly what you're saying when you
Yeah.
think about
And a
that.
lot of times it's like tame the emotions first. Let's talk it through. Let's just get it out. And then, let's go step by step on the business decision.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. I remember, and the first business that we raised significant capital for, and it was a totally different experience because you raise the capital and you're all excited. You're an entrepreneur. You're like, man, we have the capital now. We can expand. We can do all the things we wanted to do. And then all of a sudden, a month later, reality hits when the fund that invested in you, the CFO sends you a note saying, hey, I need your monthly income statement, balance sheet, and all this. And you're going, well, wait a minute, I'm in the middle of building X, Y, and Z. So it was a reality check. There were things I liked about it. Um, but there were a lot of things I didn't like about it. And that's when I learned never to make the mistake again, that I didn't want to just take capital for the sake of taking capital. And we've spoken on this show a tremendous amount about raising capital because I think in today's environment, or some of the young entrepreneurs that come up, they feel like raising capital is a badge of honor. And sometimes they go out too prematurely. Sometimes they raise capital from the wrong people. And I think you have to think strategically when you're raising capital. So like I said before, there's more to the money than just the money. You want somebody who's going to come in and add a bit of value and help you along the way, not just say, here's the money, we expect our return in 5 years, and we're going to hound you every month. So
Totally agree.
that's just my take on it. After that, I never raised capital like that again. I raised it from more strategic investors, and it was a much better process and a much better outcome. So, um, but it's amazing that you're focused on the seed side, and there's a lot of people who aren't, because that's the early money is the riskiest money. Would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah, seed is definitely the riskiest space. And, the reason why we feel comfortable in seed is two. One is both my, fund partner and co-founder have been operators ourselves. We've run businesses. We have been through the seed stage ourselves, and both with successes and failures. So we've lived the experience of the entrepreneur and we feel comfortable. A lot of other venture capitalists have come the finance route, right? They worked at an investment bank or a
Yeah,
hedge fund, and they're professional asset managers, which is great. And they know how to read a balance sheet and an income statement and ask you about your cash flow, but they don't know how to actually roll up their sleeves and say, okay, your AdWords wasn't performing. Let's go look at this. Like, have you thought about this? Do you know this person who can help you with that? Or, your bill of materials is coming in more expensive than you thought. Well, this is what happened when my bill of materials came in more expensive than I thought. And here's what we did with this product. So, being able to be tangible is what those startups need in that a specific zone, right? And so that's one. The other reason is that over time, the insurtech space has matured. So there used to be a lot more seed stage investors, and now they've moved upstream to like Series A and later, because almost half of the capital in the space actually comes from insurance carriers themselves. So there's more than 80 insurance carriers, like household names. So you think like, Nationwide, Mass Mutual, New York Life. They have their own corporate venture capital funds that they're dedicating and investing capital. And for them, they're more risk adverse. I mean, they're great. They can be a partner, they can be an acquirer, they can give you a product to distribute. So they can help in a lot of different ways, but they like to come in a little later. So we also, as a fund, want to pick the opportunity space where there's the greatest opportunity for us. So that's kind of the balancing thing, where we feel that we can help a lot and where we see opportunity.
yeah. Oh, I agree with that. I think it's early. You don't see a lot of people out in the early stages. It's the hardest money to raise, in my opinion. It's the hardest money to raise and the least amount of people out there with it. And then a lot of the small family office types or small funds, they don't have the wherewithal to do their own due diligence. So it makes it even more difficult to raise that early type capital. But like you said, that's more of your experience, or you're comfortable in that space, just like we are, and we've done a little bit through Crunch, the agency, and when we come across a product that we like, because we feel comfortable in that space as well. So I understand your thought process, but we get involved a lot on the agency side. We get involved a lot giving that type of advice to some of our clients, because they hit problems, they hit walls, they hit issues that they never thought they were going to hit. And they could be a 20 million, $30 million a year company, and they just get sometimes hit walls and can't grow. And we can help them get past that. Yes, we can execute ads. Yes, we can execute social, and we can do all that, but we can also provide you with advice, because we've been there. I had started 4 different companies. And so I have some semblance of knowledge of, what's going on in the world. So, especially in our niche, because Crunch Growth is focused on consumer products, and that's my sweet spot. So I am not an insurance guy.
But what's funny is like, you say that we just invested in a company called Secure CPG. They're an insurance agency. And what they realized is if you're starting a consumer products company, right, whether it's like food and beverage or health and beauty or some kind of hard goods, there's a certain discipline that you have, right? Like you might be co manufacturing, you might be managing logistics.
Sure.
And your traditional, Main Street insurance agent, they don't know anything about that process. So they might be putting you in the wrong products and giving you the wrong protection. They might not even have access to the insurance carriers that insure that. So we bet on them because of their specific expertise. And one of the founders came from a marketing agency that works just like you with CPG companies, and they really understand that. So even in CPG, there's a play of venture backed companies that just focus on the insurance products for them.
Yeah. No, I've been there. I mean, it's very difficult sometimes. We a couple of years ago, we invested in a vegan natural brand, and we were helping them to grow. And they were just way overinsured, and the insurance company was, or they dealt with like a local agent who just thought that they were doing something that they weren't really doing. And so we sort of helped them through that, because I said, you're spending like, too way too much money every month on insurance. It's not, it's not that kind of product. You're not manufacturing. It's powders. It's not something that's going to kill somebody. There's not a lot of risk in it. It's vegan powders, hot cocoa, and protein powder and things like that. But so you're right. There is a need. I just never thought about it that way. Right.
Yeah, and your local agent's not going to know a benign ingredient versus a dangerous one.
Right. Right. They just they just err on the side of everything is dangerous, and will give you the most coverage you could possibly get. So that's interesting. So what? So you talk a little bit about what you do with the accelerator side, and how that works, and how you take people in, and or take groups in, and how that works.
Yeah. So we have two different accelerators. I'll cover one first and then the other one. So the first accelerator we have is called the MGA Lab. And MGA is an acronym that stands for Managing General Agency. And basically, in the insurance world, there's three different types of configurations that exist. So there's a agent. So think of this to use like a shoe analogy, right? The agent is, Foot Locker. They have inventory, they have shelves, they bring people into the stores and they distribute the product. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have manufacturers like Nike and Adidas, and they want to get their shoes in Foot Locker. That's the insurance carriers. But then sits in the middle is essentially managing general agencies. So they might not have their own manufacturing capability, but they want to create a branded shoe. So this could be like the Kobe Bryant branded Nike shoe. So Kobe Bryant is going to get better economics than just distributing. They still have to find the Foot Lockers of the world to distribute, but they're going to create a custom product and leverage the manufacturing capability of the insurance company. So that analogy still holds, but in the case of a managing general agency, it's a startup that wants to create a product that's proprietary and unique to them, but they don't have enough capital to quote unquote manufacture or create it themselves. So they go to an insurance carrier and say, "Hey, let's partner on this." The insurance carrier says, "Great, I'll give you economics so you can then find agents to sell it, but there's still enough economics for you." And we can create some incredible things. So some startups that we've helped, a company called 5x5 in Minneapolis, they've created a product for pilots that own their own planes. So let's say you were in the Air Force and then, your dream when you retired was to buy a plane, but you realize when you went to get insurance, they said you can't fly it yourself, even though you probably have more experience than the pilot you would hire. So they put telematics in the plane and then allow you to fly your own planes, assuming that you know how to fly. Another example, a company based in Calgary, Canada, is called Flora. So one of the big, global challenges today is the whole challenge around fertility, right? The US is 1.6 replacement rate. And, last I checked, you have a mom and a dad. So that's not enough to replace them. You need like 2.1 to account for infant mortality. And one of the challenges that a lot of younger people say these days is like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to have kids. I haven't found the perfect person yet. And what if I wait too long and it's going to cost a lot of money to get fertility treatments? So with Flora, whether you're in your early 20s, late 20s, or early 30s, you just buy this policy, you lock it in, like we'll call it like $100 a month. And then if down the road, you're mid 30s, you decide to have kids and you have issues, you're financially covered. So you might at that point be emotionally ready and everything else, but now this coverage protects you financially. So it's like, be able to sleep at night type of coverage for fertility. We've had companies that solve very unique problems, like a company called Sola. It's based in Atlanta, Georgia. And one of the big problems in the state of Georgia and some of the Southeast is tornadoes. So, the tornado might not be covered or heavily excluded by your existing insurance policy because it's a pretty substantial risk. So, they have a coverage where if the tornado is a certain speed based off of the F rating and, it touches down in your neighborhood or affects your house, within a day or two, they pay you out. So you could ultimately, go repair the windows and fix the backyard. And then, you might eventually get the money for the larger repairs from your insurance company, but this is like getting you back on track like right away.
Right.
So, these are all things that you don't normally think of, but it's like very real problems, the tornado alley shifting, fertility, or, this specialty area of people that want to have their own airplanes.
So if I came up with an idea for insurance, I could go to one of the big insurance companies and say, hey, I want to package this up and sell it. They would create the product for me, and then I would just go out and sell it branded under my name.
Yeah, so that's how like the MGA works, but the thing that you just said is easier said than done. There's
You're
entrepreneurs
right.
that spent like 3 to 5 years and still didn't get it done. So the purpose of our program is to compress that like 2 or 3 year process down to 6 months and give people the mentorship. So, they get access to 4 mentors, someone who's done it before, we call a program mentor, an attorney, because insurance companies and insurance startups are basically a promise, right? It's an
Sure.
insurance policy, it's a written document or a contract. So you need an attorney to help you with that, an actuary, because ultimately they come up with the pricing of the policy, and a specialist called an underwriter, which helps you figure out what's a good risk, what's a bad risk. So they work with the companies for 3 months, and then we get them connected to the insurance companies, the agents to distribute their products, and then provide them with education every week for the 3 months.
Yeah, that's great. So I couldn't just come right out and get my own concept and brand, and then go to an insurance company and sit and say, okay, here's what I want to do. They won't hear
You could certainly give it a shot, but a
it.
lot of these insurance companies are pretty, stodgy companies. So their first question is like, Phil, when was the last time you underwrote this risk? What's your experience? And you'll probably say, oh, I didn't know I had to do this before. This is a new idea. And they're like,
Yeah.
come back to me when you have someone that's done it before.
Yeah, it's not. The mistakes I've made in life, in business, is I always tell everybody, I founded 4 businesses, but I also, founded 6 others that failed. And usually they failed when I got involved in something I didn't understand, like fashion. We were involved in fashion. I have no business being in fashion. I can barely dress myself. And, so this would be one that I don't think I would get involved in. But I mean, it sounds interesting. I didn't realize you could do that, I guess is my point. I didn't realize you could actually white label a product. If you understand the business, you could white label a product, have a larger insurance company handle the specifics of it, and you go out and sell it, which is an interesting
Exactly.
proposition.
Yeah.
And what's your other accelerator? You said you had 2.
Yeah, so the other accelerator is called InsurTech Match. So this is focused on your traditional software as a service companies. So essentially, like they have a different evolution than MGA in a sense that their customers are the insurance industry, and like any other software company, they need to build their product, they need to market it, and they need to get customers and then service those customers. So that program is focused on companies that are further along. So they might have like, 500,000 in revenue. They might have their first few customers, but then they hit a plateau. They want to meet like the next 10 customers. And that program is really focused on how to meet the next 10 customers, how to build the right culture in your organization to continue to grow. And then, the ultimate question of like, how do you fundraise once you've raised your first amount of capital to keep growing till you ultimately hit a liquidation event?
Right. Yeah. So do you guys, I would imagine with that one that you've got um, people that you can reach out to that invest in that space that you could introduce them to that you
Yeah.
know of.
So just like Y Combinator, we run a demo day and we usually have anywhere from 50 to 100 investors that just focus on insurance come to that demo day.
Wow. That's fantastic. And you're based in New York, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. Anybody who has a concept of insurance can get in touch with David and maybe join one of his accelerator programs. If
Yeah, and we accept startups globally, so you don't need to be in New York. We've had companies from Singapore, from Germany, from Canada, Ireland, UK, all over.
Wow, so you do it virtually?
No, it's in person. So basically, there's 3 days in person for the core program, and then the rest is virtual.
Oh
So
wow,
hybrid.
yeah, that's fantastic. I think accelerators are great. We have one here in Baltimore, which is fantastic, but not quite as refined as yours. But yeah, it's I think it's great for startups because I think the biggest problem that we see with startups is, especially in either the SaaS space or the consumer product space, is everybody puts all their effort into building their product, whether that product is virtual or whether that product is physical, and they don't think about marketing it and getting people to buy it. And that always winds up as the obstacle to scale because if you don't, you can build the greatest product in the world, but if you can't get it in the hands of the people to use it, it's worthless. And too many people think, oh, we'll just put up a website and people will come, but you have to get people there. So
Yeah, totally agree. I think the number one determinant of success or failure, other than the team, is the ability to distribute their product, whether it's a software or it's an insurance product.
yeah. And how do you guys help them do that? You have
Yeah,
marketers inside the accelerator?
yeah. So in terms of the InsurTech match program, we have like between 20 and 40 insurance carriers to participate every year, and they tell us what they're looking for. So we only accept companies into the program that we know are solving the problems of those insurance carriers. So they can give them feedback on the product, they can become customers. And then we have a mentor network of about 200 mentors, or anything from marketers, product developers, former insurance company executives that can help them really refine their proposition and make introductions beyond the 40 companies that are in the program.
So let me ask you this. If the insurance companies, like you just said, the carriers know what the problem is, know where the gap is in the market, why don't they just do it themselves? Why do they need third parties?
Yeah, I mean that is one of the maybe the $64,000 question, but I think the semi easy answer to that is, if you're a Stanford engineer that just, graduated and is in Palo Alto, you're probably unlikely to want to move to Columbus, Ohio to go and work at Nationwide. And I mean, I love Columbus, Ohio, and people at Nationwide are super nice. But, there's just this premise that the top software engineers want to work at the companies that are known for software engineering, Amazon and Facebook and Palantir. So a lot of times the insurance companies just don't attract the best tech talent. And, in the 1960s, they probably did. They were some of the first companies to use, mainframes and newer technologies. But now there's, other sector industries that are pulling software engineers. So what the insurers have realized is that why spend the money to have really expensive engineers when there's these great insurtech startup companies that have attracted them because, they're insurance tech, and we can just buy the software from them and then get our competitors to pay for all the R&D.
it's so it's it's similar. Like you look at uh, some of the startups that have started not just in the insurance space, but just startups that have look at a brand like Poppy, which was a natural carbonated soda, carbonated beverage, and just got acquired a couple of maybe a year ago or so by I think it was Coca Cola for gobs of money, billions. And you think, okay, they knew that that was a problem. They knew that there was a gap in the market. Why didn't they just do it themselves? But you realize exactly what you just said. They can't. They either don't have the internal infrastructure to do it, the internal talent to do it, or they just can't. They don't have the ability to innovate
Yeah.
because their culture is so focused on what they do every day that they just don't have the ability to innovate.
Well, the other problem is the, traditional innovators dilemma, right? So if you're in Hartford, Connecticut working at Travelers, right? A big win for you is finding another $100 million business opportunity where you can get, new premium. So if it's a startup and you're starting from zero, first you're going to get to $1 million in premium, and that doesn't become interesting to travelers. So it might take you 7 years to get to, 100 million, or in the case they just bought Corvus, a cyber insurance company that had, about 200 million in premium, but it took Corvus, 6 or 7 years to get there. So
Sure.
they didn't become interesting to travelers until they got to scale.
Right. Yeah, it's the dilemma. I mean, but that's why it's interesting sometimes. We had a guy on the show a couple of months ago who said, um, you should never, when you start your company, you should never be emotionally tied to it. You should always be prepared from day one to be able to sell it and always have targets on where you want to sell it to, even if you don't ever execute that, even if it's 10, 15, 20 years from now. But you should always have that mentality. And what he was alluding to was the fact that, which again, I'll use Poppy as an example. They when she built that business, she always knew she was going to exit to one of the big ones because she knew that it was going to get to a point where she just didn't have the wherewithal, and building an infrastructure to get that product international would just be a huge burden. And so she built it knowing that at some point she was going to exit, but she was going to build it and scale it to the point where it became attractive to the larger companies. And they've done it before, right? Pepsi and Coke have been known to acquire, water companies or, functional beverage companies, places where they couldn't go. Uh, because of that very reason, it doesn't become attractive to them inside the company. Nobody wants to hear that Bob's little project $2 million last year when Coke did $2 million in one chain yesterday. So,
Yeah. Well, and that's the flip side of it is large corporations are very good at stability, process, and global distribution.
right.
So, it makes sense at some point if you want your business to continue to exist forever to put it in a place with stability. So, it is almost sort of yin and yang there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we're almost we're almost at the end. So any advice to entrepreneurs, startups, anything in your world? Any advice and any thoughts on that whole space?
Yeah. So, two pieces of advice. One is listen to the market. So, one of the most common pitfalls I see of entrepreneurs is they get very excited about their idea and the product idea, and they believe that their customers have the same perspective as them, even if they used to be a customer. So, don't rest on, your history. No matter what it is, go out and talk to the market. It's one thing to get a survey. It's a better thing to go and meet someone live face to face, ask them about your product, and don't say, will you buy it? Ask them, what are you using today? What is the challenge? Is that solving it? If it was 10% better, would you make a switch? Why wouldn't you make a switch? Like, go into those details and read their body language, read their emotions. The higher fidelity, the better. And the more you can kind of use that lean startup methodology and test one step at a time, talk to the market, test another step, the lower the risk that you're going to have, because it's already risky enough being an entrepreneur, and then being an entrepreneur where you don't know you have product market fit is basically dooming you to failure. So the more you can listen to the market, get feedback, people are friendly, they want to help, the more successful your product will be. And then the second piece of advice I have is, like, ultimately grit is where it's at, and maybe because my last name has those letters in it, I can say that. But essentially, ultimately, things take longer than you think that they're going to take. Things are very unpredictable. So you've probably seen the graphics online. It's not a straight line to success. It's more like a spaghetti bowl, and you need to just say, if you're really going to start a successful startup, I'm going to dedicate a decade to this and figure out where it takes me. And I think about, my own journey, right? I've now been in InsurTech for a decade. And did I think when I set out that we were going to build the largest community in the US for InsurTech? No, I just thought, hey, this is a cool space. My friend said that I can help him turn around his company, and I'm going to have a good time and learn something new and see where it takes me. And it's been a great journey. I've been able to meet some incredible entrepreneurs, and I look forward to the next decade as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a guest on 2 weeks ago, venture capital guy, and he said the same thing. He said, too many entrepreneurs build their product in a vacuum, and it looks good to them, and they just keep pushing forward without ever talking to the market, without ever talking to a potential customer. And what we preach to startups, what I preach when I coach them is, get your minimum viable product out there and find somebody who's going to buy it. Let them, test it and find out what they like and don't like about it, and is that something that they would pay for, right? Because if you don't have somebody who's going to buy your product, you have nothing. So
Yeah. Yeah, ultimately, you don't wanna run into people that say verbally they'll buy it, and then when you actually come to them with the product, I think the saying is, "The arms are too short and the pockets are too
yeah.
long. Can't reach my, checkbook."
That's right. The arms are too short and the pockets are too big. Yeah. So that was great. Very informative. I again, it was an area, and I said it in the beginning, an area I know nothing about, and now I feel like I at least have an education. I'm very surprised that I didn't realize that you could actually go out and figure out a. Not that I would do it because again, I'm not in the insurance space, but be able to go out and come up with a product and develop a product, and then if you had the credibility, bring it to an insurance company and they would create it with you, and you could go out and sell it. It's almost like, again, white labeling a product. So that's
Yeah.
interesting to me. So not that I would do it. I wouldn't get involved in it. I don't know enough about it to do it, and I've learned my lesson from the past, from getting into things that I know nothing about. It doesn't work for me. So yeah, and how can people get in touch with you? I we have your LinkedIn and your website in the description. If people want to, if people are listening that are in the space and they want to get in touch with you, how would they do that? LinkedIn is the
Yeah,
best way.
LinkedIn is the best. Send me a connection request and send me a message, and I'll do my best to respond. We also have like a contact form on our website, so that goes to our whole team, and someone will get back to you. Or if it's you want to talk to me and get feedback on something, just put that in the message, and happy to see how we can help.
That's great. That's great. So I think that wraps up another high impact episode of Crunching Your Growth, and that was David Gritz, a true catalyst in the insurtech revolution. If you're an entrepreneur, an investor, or just curious about how old school industries are being reimagined with new technology, take notes from David's journey. Be sure to follow the show, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone thinking about breaking into the next wave of tech-driven innovation in insurance. So until next time, keep growing, keep iterating, and keep crunching your growth.